Right, so welcome, Keval. And it's quite exciting for us this morning because for the first time we've got a dentist on the podcast. So we're really keen to hear more about not just your journey to becoming plant based, but your journey into dentistry.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. I think for a lot of people, the reasons why they join any healthcare profession is to help people. The choice that I had when I had to make that choice was, do I go into medicine or do I go into dentistry? And the factor that kind of won was better hours. So that's why I went down the dentistry route. But I also had a real, I still have a keen interest in painting, fine art. And I felt that that would help me again practice that in 3D, in people's mouths, getting their smiles better. So it kind of worked both ways. But that was a long time ago, and now once you get into the swing of things, it's all about almost having a little community of your own, whereby you see your patients, but they almost become like family, and you see them every 6 months. So there's a social side to it now as well that I didn't realize that there would be. But yeah, it's going well.
Right, and maybe a little bit about how you came to be plant based.
Ever since I can remember, I've always had the feeling of wanting to help others and to reduce others' suffering. So even when I was really young, anytime I used to see an animal or someone needing help, I would go out and try and do as much as I can. But I grew up in Kenya, and living there, you witness poverty firsthand. You witness wildlife. I witnessed wildlife, being killed, poached, and at that time in the 80s and 90s, it was really big business for a lot of people, coming in, and it was almost like poaching was so rife. And then the president at that time made a statement to say, look, this needs to end, and it was quite a big thing at that time. So the elephants were declining in that part of the world. But again, even the poverty side of things. So everywhere I kind of looked, it was things that I didn't like to see. So I kind of made up my mind that whatever I ended up doing in life, I'll always try and be there for others and try and help others. And I felt, especially animals, there's no voice, there's no one speaking up for them. So that became pretty much one of the main things that I wanted to do and try and help them. So that kind of started off my journey internally. And yet I was still stuck in this system whereby I didn't realize that dairy was so unjust and caused so much suffering to cows. I didn't know about the egg industry and how much suffering it causes to chickens. So I grew up in a vegetarian family, so dairy and eggs was a part of it. And then when I finished university, I watched Earthlings, like a lot of people have, and that kind of changed my view completely. And I realized exactly how, even amongst, with the clothing that we wear, that there's exploitation and suffering and death at every single stage when it comes to animals. So that was the final nail in the coffin for me, and that was it. And it didn't matter to me at that stage to about getting my so-called food or nutrition. At that time I just wanted to stop it. And then thankfully, even though this was about 12, 13 years ago, I was surrounded by a few people who were already vegan, and they kind of helped me, transition very quickly. But even if they weren't around, I feel that I would have found my way, because more and more there was so much information coming out then. But today, wherever you look, you find information, you find everything that you need to know about going plant based. So that was pretty much my journey. It started off as a justice point of view.
Given that we're a health related podcast and you mentioned there about sort of finding your way with the plant based diet, what we're really interested to do today is to unpack what diet might have to do with teeth. But before we get onto that, given that we haven't had a dental expert on before, and actually there might be a lot of doctors or nurses or other health professionals listening to this podcast who really don't know very much about the best way of looking after your teeth. So can we ask you quite a simple question, which is really to talk us through what good dental hygiene actually looks like?
Yeah. So what we have to do is look at it firstly as the mouth being a mirror to the whole body. In a way, it's the first entry point to our gut. So when we think about the mouth, we want it to be as healthy as possible. Because if you think about teeth, and if you think about our oral cavity as a whole, there are things that come from the outside that may affect it positively and negatively. And at the same time, there is our immune system, there's our entire bodily systems that affect the mouth as well from that internal point of view. So we have to think about both of those ways to try and make sure that it's the healthiest possible oral cavity that we have. So if you think about externally, we have things like food that affect it. We have hygiene in terms of the amount of plaque that's building up on our teeth. And then we have the added factor of saliva. Now, saliva is actually a very, very good thing. It's very protective of on our teeth. So that has to be kept at an optimum level as well. But again, all of this is affected by how we are. How our immune system is, how healthy we are as a person. And if you imagine, if you're not healthy physically, looking after your teeth and your mouth is the last thing on your mind. You let everything else, come first, and then you leave. You let go of any oral hygiene practices that you might have, or usually comes last because it gives you pain at a very later stage if anything goes wrong. Going back to the kind of foods that we eat. So if you have things that are high in sugar, if you have foods that are high, they're very acidic, those two things tend to affect the teeth straight away. Now, when it comes to sugar, we just like every single part of our lining from the mouth to the distal gut is full of bacteria, right? And these are bacteria that most of the time work really well for us, and it's part of the microbiome. But if we start giving them the wrong kind of foods, because they're all feeding, everyone's feeding, we're just made up of trillions of bacteria, and we're all feeding on the stuff that we put in. If we give the bacteria in our mouths the wrong foods, what then happens is acid starts to form. And when that acid forms, if you imagine our enamel on our teeth is the strongest, hardest substance in the human body. But when acid comes onto it repeatedly over and over again, you start getting holes in it. And you start getting fractures and holes in the structure of the enamel. And as it gets deeper, it just gets easier and easier for all of those things to demineralize, soften up. And that's how you get tooth decay. Secondly, the second factor obviously is the plaque. And a plaque is just, again, a community of bacteria that are stuck to our teeth. They're stuck to appliances that we might have, like dentures. They're stuck to our mucosal lining. So if you want to control it, what you have to do is eat the right foods, brush properly, keep the plaque away as much as possible, and make sure that your salivary production is good. If you can do those three things, you never have to get tooth decay, ever. And it's as simple as that. And people get surprised, and when I tend to tell some of my patients that I don't have any fillings, people get surprised when they realize it's a preventative disease and no one has to suffer from it. And again, going back to the immune system itself. Now, if you imagine, it's a balance everywhere in our mouth or anywhere in our body, is a balance between our immune system and what it has to encounter. The same thing in the mouth as well. So if you get two people with equal amounts of plaque building up, and if one of them has a compromised immune system, his gums or her gums are going to suffer. And by that, I mean inflammation starts. And when inflammation starts, the gums get inflamed, and then the bone underneath starts to get inflamed. And then the body decides, look, you know what? These teeth are just, they're not helping me. So what I want to do then is get rid of that bone. And when the bone starts to recede, the gums follow, and the attachment for the teeth tends to go as a protective mechanism, because the body does not want bacteria or negative factors coming in. So again, if the immune system is working well, and we know that that's related to the gut microbiome as well and a lot of other things, then what we have is better chance of us, getting through any kind of gum disease or tooth decay or anything that we have. So two things we have to remember: stay healthy within and keep the mouth healthy as much as possible.
And just touching on that, So when people start to sort of be pushed by the dentist because they've already got decay to use higher concentrations of fluoride toothpaste or to, be doing the flossing every day, what role do those actions have?
The evidence shows that fluoride has a very good impact when it comes to remineralization, when it comes to preventing more demineralization or tooth decay. So you're absolutely right. There are a lot of patients, a lot of people who are more prone to decay for whom we do prescribe toothpaste with a higher fluoride concentration. But there are also concerns that, if we ingest fluoride, what happens internally? It's very simple. We're not asking people to swallow it. We're just asking them to just keep it in their mouths, spit out the excess, and whatever little remains helps to work on the teeth. So, in my opinion, fluoride has more of a positive benefit than anything negative that might happen if we take high concentrations inside, which, unless we swallow large amounts of it, it's not going to have any impact. And again, with flossing, like you said, there are certain areas, especially in between the teeth, that the toothbrush never gets to. So if you have plaque gathering on your teeth, you could be the best toothbrusher in the world, but you're only hitting about 60% of surfaces because the bristles never get in between the teeth. And that's when you need physical cleaning in between the teeth. So a mouthwash is good, and with mouthwashes help me in trying to do this. And I always tell them, if you have something stuck on the body of your car, would you rather physically take it off, or would you keep spraying water on it or some sort of chemical on it to try and take it off? And always, it's much better to physically take debris off or plaque off compared to any other mouthwash that you might want to use. There comes a point in certain stages in our life when it's difficult for us to brush, difficult for us to floss. And in that case, you have a mouthwash called chlorhexidine, and the brand name's usually Corsadil. That is, in my opinion, the only useful mouthwash there is out there. And that tends to decrease the amount of plaque and bacteria that we might have. So it keeps you going for a little while until you can start brushing again and flossing again.
Fantastic. Those are really good tips. And I'm so impressed that you have no fillings, Keval, and I wish that I'd had you looking after my teeth when I was a child. But I wanted to talk a little bit before we come back to sort of adults and teeth about children's teeth in particular. And I think there's been a lot of emphasis in the healthcare press about the state of children's teeth and it being, one of the commonest reasons for emergency admission to hospital, for example. What do you think are the current challenges in improving dental hygiene for children?
Okay, so again, I feel this comes down to two factors. Now, the education side of things, the preventive side of things, where parents have a role to play in how much and what foods they're giving their kids. So that's really, really important. So if parents were actually educated about this, then it helps to prevent all of these problems that are going on. But the other thing is, when they go to school, parents have no control over what they're eating when they come back from school. So teachers have to be educated on this as well. So there's a level of education that needs to go into prevention, which is always easier and better and cheaper than the cure. But the problem on the other side then is if things do get out of line, you're absolutely right. There's such a shortage, firstly, of NHS dentistry. There's more of a demand to have this all addressed compared to the amount of supply that we have. And I think this really comes down to mismanagement when it comes to government, when it comes to how money is given and allocated to the NHS. I feel when it comes to these things, we have enough money in this country to solve the health crisis, be it dental or any other health crisis, but we tend to mismanage it, and this goes on, up to the highest level. So again, how I said that decay is preventable, as an individual, even as a system, decay is preventable, but it needs right actions from the highest of posts, but also on the local level, the education amongst parents and teachers has to be a really, really important focus, and it should be part of the curriculum. We shouldn't have to have dentists coming in and educating. It's simple stuff. So parents, teachers, even if they could incorporate this in their syllabus, and regularly ask and remind kids, look, this is how we need to look after our teeth, that will be easier to achieve than expecting the government to unfortunately allocate funds to treat it on the other side. And, we're still lucky here. We still have the NHS. But in so many countries around the world, a simple dental infection can kill you. So my wife and I, we're part of this foundation called the Better Lives Foundation. We're trying to improve dental health care in Sierra Leone. And in that country, there's no dental schools, and there's 5 practicing dentists in the whole country. And last time when we went in November, we treated about 200 to 250 patients, and we had to extract about 400 teeth. Again, these are all things that could have been prevented with the right education, with the right funding. But it's become such a problem whereby, on 2 levels, firstly, you could die from a dental infection. And secondly, with the months or weeks that you're in pain, you can't even function, you can't even do your work, you can't earn a living for your family. So everything starts to suffer if these basic issues are not addressed. And same thing with kids, going back to the kids situation here. While they're suffering, while they're waiting for the dental appointment to come through, or waiting for the hospital to call them and have it treated, they're suffering. They can't focus on their studying, they have sleepless nights. Everyone suffers at every level. So both stages, individually and at the government level, we have to try and address this.
Right. I mean, it's really interesting what you said about Sierra Leone, because obviously I would have thought that a country like Sierra Leone would have maybe had less of the problems with dental hygiene
Mm.
because of the diet. If you go back to how the diet would be, less ultra processed foods and things like that.
Yeah.
And one of the things where you're talking about education in schools, where I think there's a lot of confusion for people, is talking about fruits and whether these are bad for teeth. I was talking to some primary care staff about plant-based diets recently, and one of the nurses said that she'd been made to feel very ashamed about her child's tooth decay because she'd been feeding her children fruit salad, and the dentist said, well, that's why your children's teeth have got into a state. And I wondered what you thought about that.
When it comes to fruits in general, fresh fruits, absolutely fine. We need that for our healthy functioning. We need that for the prevention of all sorts of problems in our body. When it comes to dried fruits like raisins, apricots, etc., again, very, very healthy for us. We need that, but we have to make sure that they don't get stuck on our teeth. And a lot of the times when it comes to snacking, and we like, kids like sweet stuff. A lot of parents in their good intentions give a packet of raisins to them, thinking, okay, it's fruits, it's not sweets, it'll be good. But this is when things get stuck. What happens is it festers, it just collects in your teeth. And even though it's not as bad as sweets, boiled sweets or chocolates or whatever, with time, even if you have low concentrations of sugar, that builds up, and that if it's consistently there and it's not removed, it does tend to affect teeth. So then, again, it's just about giving them at the right time. So having it within a meal, so everything's mixed up, or if they have it in isolation, to just have just a brush after and just make sure that all of those bits are removed. And it would just again be just a simple step of making sure that you go back to those 3 factors of make sure the food's not stuck, make sure there's enough saliva in the mouth, and again, bacteria. The other tip that I normally give to people is that if they're out and about and if they have something sweet, just have a sugar-free chewing gum straight after, because that stimulates saliva. Saliva automatically neutralizes the acid, and you go back to a neutral pH. And that's it.
That's a really good tip, and one that I'm a bit surprised by, only because when I was back at school a long time ago, we used to have
Mm.
something called social education.
Yeah.
And I remember a teacher specifically telling us that if you have sugar-free gum, you might develop a stomach ulcer because you'll produce stomach acid and then you don't get anything to eat. And it's funny how these messages stick in our head. But
Mm.
now I'm going to start buying the sugar-free gum again for sure.
And that sounds easier than carrying a toothbrush around, Claire.
Definitely. Now, I want to stay on the topic of education and children, and the idea that, obviously we're promoting plant-based diets here. And people will want to know whether there are any risks to the development of strong and healthy teeth in children who are following plant-based diets, and whether there are real risks that they might become deficient in calcium or any other important nutrients, and whether there's anything that people need to watch out for.
If we have a balanced, well-balanced plant-based nutrition, we have nothing to worry about. And when I get asked that question, I go back to asking them, where do you think cows get their calcium from? Because we think that it all comes from milk, cow's milk. It's rich in calcium, but where do cows get their calcium from? And it's just grass. It's just vegetables. And then that's when I tell them that every single nutrient that we have originates from plant-based foods. So if you have well-balanced plant-based nutrition, you will get all the nutrients that you need, including calcium, iron, magnesium, and all of the ones that we need for healthy functioning. So there's nothing to worry about. And the other thing that's really good that would really help is having a poster in your surgeries or wherever about all the plant-based sources of calcium. And my wife's really good at it. She has a poster in her surgery, and patients come in and straight away look after it. She has a poster about good sources of iron, good sources of calcium, protein, all the usual questions that we get asked about plant-based nutrition. So even without verbally thinking about the topic, it's all there. It's all there for patients to see. So definitely, if you get well-balanced plant-based nutrition, you don't have to worry about getting your nutrients. Obviously, when it comes to B12, supplemented at any age. So that's a good thing to do. But yeah, that's fruits, nuts, vegetables, seeds, etc. All of them have varying amounts of calcium and protein. So yeah, I would say just go for it. Just, have as much as you can.
Great to hear. So we've already alluded to some of the consequences of neglecting your oral hygiene. And, we've obviously talked about the effect on people if they've got a tooth abscess, if they're waiting for an extraction, their ability to work, what that does to their mood. I'm sure it correlates with rates of depression and things like that. Are there any other sort of big health consequences of neglecting dental hygiene? And specifically, Daisy, when you were doing the research for the questions, you were looking at the headlines regarding oral health and Alzheimer's dementia.
Yeah. So there has been some evidence of periodontitis related salivary microbiota affecting or impacting Alzheimer's dementia. There is some evidence of it, but I don't think there's enough of it. The reason why it gets a little bit difficult is firstly, how does the oral microbiota reach the gut microbiome? So there's two routes how that could happen, is through the enteral route or through the bloodstream. So through the enteral route, you have the stomach coming in, and the stomach acid usually obliterates most of the bacteria that comes through it anyway. But despite that, they've still found presence of oral microbiota in the gut, especially with some patients with bowel cancer, with inflammatory bowel disease. But like you just mentioned, there is certain papers, certain evidence that kind of links the oral microbiota with the Alzheimer's dementia condition. But I don't feel there is enough to have a strong link with it, but it's something that needs more research into. But I think generally, without having to go too deep into it, if we, like I said before, if we can look after the oral cavity and make sure that that's healthy, we know there is a link to the gut microbiome, even not enterally, but through the bloodstream. And if we can keep that healthy, the immune system's not pushed to try and fight off all the stuff that's in the mouth. And that's when it can actually be healthy and optimal enough to fight things within the body itself. And again, the gut microbiome regulating the immune system and vice versa, and how that has to keep functioning together well. So what we're doing by eating well and keeping the mouth healthy is giving our immune system and the gut microbiome a chance to deal with the other conditions that unfortunately happen within the body that we have no control over. So that's the way I kind of look at it. And the other thing that I think is really important is to mention, just going a little bit further, is the fact that if we don't have the dentition to try and digest or masticate fibrous foods, especially, if we can't do that, we tend to avoid it. But what that tends to do is make the gut microbiome suffer because that's their main food. And when that suffers, the immune system suffers. And again, we go back to things in our body, the systems in our body breaking down because everything's out of line. So even at that level of physically looking after your teeth and making sure you have a functioning dentition, that's almost the key to having a functioning, healthy immune system or preventing diseases like, heart disease, cancer, because it all starts, it all starts from the foods that we put into our mouths. The environmental factors and the genetic factors, which we can't control, but the environment plays such a big part of it. And food's the main thing. Food, exercise is the main thing. So if we're able to digest and masticate pretty much all the foods that we need to, then we're already winning. So that's kind of the
when I've met patients that have been in poor health and they haven't liked wearing dentures, and I've wanted to suggest to them eating more sort of nuts or seeds or adding things to their porridge, and they just can't. If there's one thing that's kind of stayed with me apart from the comment about the sugar-free gum, it's that I love grazing on nuts and fruits during the day, but the importance of actually cleaning those out between the tight gaps in my teeth. Otherwise, I won't be able to enjoy them in the future.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. And what's really stood out for me, I think, is that connection between our oral health and our overall health. Because I think as a doctor, you quite often think, oh, I don't know anything about teeth. That's for the dentist. Go away. I can't deal with this. But actually, it's all connected, isn't it? And it's so important to look after both together. And on that note, can I just clarify then the 3 steps about the looking after our mouth? You mentioned, obviously, the regular brushing and the flossing, reducing sort of sugary foods or cleaning out the mouth straight after. But the third one, the production of saliva, other than the tip for having sugar-free gum, how else can we maintain that important aspect?
So for most people, the reason why saliva production goes down, the commonest reason is medication. And why do we have to have those medications in the first place is because the body is breaking down in certain ways, right? Now, the reason why that body is breaking down is because of disease or inflammation or whatever that's happening. But again, we know that a lot of diseases, chronic diseases that we suffer from, has to do with eating the wrong kinds of foods. So if we go back to square one and eat the right kind of foods, then we don't suffer from these chronic, inflammatory diseases and infections or disorders. We don't have to have the medications that in turn reduces the salivary flow, and that actually exacerbates decay. So it's a vicious cycle. If you go down that route of not eating right, it just gets worse and worse in every single way.
That's so interesting. Another way that it's all connected. Thank you, Keval. Is there anything else about teeth, or I suppose plant-based diets and teeth, that what we should be aware of before we move on, or anything else you'd like to add?
The other thing that a lot of people obviously suffer from is stress. The world that we live in. And what that tends to do is we tend to become bruxists, where we tend to use these muscles all the time because we're clenching all the time. And what that tends to lead to is, again, inability to open fully or pain on chewing. And again, when that happens, everything else goes down the wayside. So there's so many things internally and externally that affect us in so many different ways. So it's about managing it, having the right information, but also when it comes to stress, how do we deal with stress to start with? Because then stress eating starts, right? You eat the wrong kinds of foods, junk foods, sweet foods, we just binge eat because we're stressed out. And again, that leads to deterioration of dental health, bodily health, etc. So it's almost like we have to audit at the end of the day, how we can manage these things. And if the focus is on prevention at every single level of our society, then we can actively look at it and say, look, it's been a bad day. I was stressed out. I ate the wrong foods. All this is happening. I need to manage this as much as I can. So tomorrow I will be better. But we don't tend to do that. We tend to look at other things like money and our own performance and all these other things, but we tend to neglect what could be some of the most important things that we should be looking at.
Yeah. Do you ever have these sorts of conversations with your patients?
I have all sorts of conversations with my patients. Yeah. I mean, it's nice because when the social side comes into play, they open up about their own issues, And you can see how all of this is affecting them. But also, there's a positive side to things as well. And they tend to share what happened to them, and then they remember what you told them the time before, how they've improved. So it's nice in that way. Unlike being in secondary care, where you usually see people just for one time and then they're gone. This is nice. It's different in that way. And you tend to build up on what you've told them. You tend to reinforce things. So in that way, it works really, really well. So where I work and what I do, I don't really have to deal with acute conditions as much. It's more about maintaining things as they are. It's more about just giving them new information and making sure that everything's working well. So again, I know that's to do with deprivation as well, where you live, how much money you have, all of that stuff. But I'm quite lucky that where I am, things are stable, and that's what we want. We want a stable population when it comes to this.
Brilliant. We'd love to hear more about the work you do outside of your day job as well. You're quite active, aren't you, in terms of both the environmental and ethical sides of being vegan. Can you tell us a bit more about that?
I do get involved with campaigns that Animal Rising do, and try and take part in these things. So the latest campaign is the RSPCA Assured scheme, and how it is actually tricking public into thinking that it's okay to buy these products, where when the investigations were done, not only were the animals kept in the most horrible conditions, but it actually makes you think, when the world's biggest animal protection charity is putting their stamp on exploitation and murder at a basic level, if they can't ensure it, there's no way we can ensure it. So it really makes people think, and I think it's such a brilliant campaign that we, and again, I speak to people about it everywhere because they all favor the RSPCA. But when they realize, okay, this is what's happening, and the RSPCA can't ensure anything is done humanely, then how can we ensure any product in any supermarket is actually a humanely killed or humanely exploited product? So that's, that for me, that's the kind of the community or the social aspect of what I do in activism. But there's a lot of things that I feel that we can all do, and I try and do other things as well, whereby I divide it in. I call it the 3x3 action cube. And what I do is I have this 3 squares on top and 3 on the bottom. So it's 9 squares. Going back, when it comes to the problems that we face in our world, the financial crisis, the environmental crisis, the ecological crisis, the food crisis, the health crisis, all of it is linked to our exploitation of 80 billion land animals and the killing of 2 to 3 trillion ocean beings every year. The question is, how do we get people to realize that, firstly? And secondly, once we've done that, how do we incorporate that level of urgency into them? So people, unfortunately, I find that a lot of them can't seem to connect on an ethical level, because they just think, okay, this is just the way it is. And, I've been doing it for years and years. How do I change? Unless they have a companion, unless they've been with animals or they're able to make that connection, they don't tend to change for the animal side of things. So that's when we have to bring in their own interests into play. So if you think about how most people live their lives now, we're normally just interested in three things: making money, protecting our loved ones, and having fun, right? So when I speak to people, I tell them there's something that's going to affect all of these three things that you actually live for. These things that's all we do all day long. Focus on those three things. And when I tell them there's something that's happening that's going to severely impact all of these things that you love doing, three things, what are we going to do about it? And they normally say, you know what, whatever needs to be done, we will do it. So then I try and explain to them how our habit of exploiting and killing all these animals every single year is affecting all of that. Again, when it comes to making money, why are we making money as much as we can? Because again, we want to provide to our loved ones and we want to have fun. So that's basically why we do things. So a lot of people that I speak to, they love going on holidays and they love having, a good time and all of that elsewhere. But we all also know that a lot of these countries that we love visiting are being affected by climate change. So I give them an example. Like my wife and I, we went to the Maldives a few years ago, and the whole island literally got flooded overnight. There was a storm surge that wiped out the boats, Their only means of transport, all the homes were flooded. You have to paint a picture of actually what's happened. We all focus on the good things, but I actually tell them, look, this is what's happened. And it decimated the entire island. And we spent a day or two cleaning the island, helping the locals find accommodation. I tell them what exactly happened on all these nice holidays that we go to. And now more and more, what they're all complaining about is everywhere they go, all these tropical regions, the weather's completely unstable. So I asked them, like, do we want a stable climate or not? Even here, we've had such a bad year that our food prices are going to go up. So that's the other thing that people worry about, food prices going up, complain about the weather. And I tell them, look, if we want to do this, we have to do just three things, and that'll help us, right? Going plant-based, and I explain to them why it'll help. Reforesting and rewilding everywhere we can. And again, that they click onto that very, very easily, because ever since we're young, we're told plant more trees, help the environment, all of that. They understand that very well, but they don't understand how urgent it is. Thirdly, protecting the ocean. So not eating seafood, fishes, all of that. And I tell them why that's so important. So I link it back to their own personal interests. And when we can do that, then they seem to be able to connect to it a lot more better, because they're actually fulfilling their own self-interest in that way. But then I go on to explain to them that the amount of time that we have to do it is so little. Because again, people think, oh, it's a 2050 problem, it's a 2040 problem. And I tell them, how you mentioned about the birds earlier, I tell them we have less than 2 years to fix this. Because all the research shows that if we follow how fast wild animals are going extinct, 2026 is year zero. That's when all unprotected wildlife on Earth will pretty much be gone. And it's really shocking, but this is what the World Wildlife Fund has actually shown. And again, people don't know this because this is not headline news. And again, people think, okay, it's wildlife, it's sad, my kids won't be able to see it, but so what? And I tell them the reason why this is important, because it represents the breakdown of our planet's life support systems. So then I take it back to the human body. I said, look, we have organs in our body. We have our own life support systems in our body. Now imagine if your lungs tend to collapse one day, your lungs stop working. It only takes one life support system inside of you for us to die. Right now, 6 out of 9 of our planetary life support systems are in peril. We've crossed the red lines on 6 out of 9. That's the equivalent of 6 organs in our body already failing or dying. And that's why I tell them we have less than 2 years to fix this problem. It's mind-boggling to even think about how little time we have left. But I tell them casually, look, this is what's happening. So we really have to implement those 3 things very, very fast. And that'll help solve the problem, and explain to them why it will do it. So once they get that, then they're ready to act. They're like, okay, how do we do this? So that goes back to that 3x3 thing. So we have going plant-based, reforesting and rewilding wherever we can, protecting the oceans. And on this side, we have individual, society, and financial. So you can fill in each box and what you need to do in each box. So right, if you take, for example, societal action of going vegan, of protecting the forests and protecting the ocean, then as a community we can organize tree planting days. We can work with our local council, and this is a very fun way of introducing people to veganism, protecting animals, protecting nature, because a lot of people don't like coming at it from a way that it affects their food. So if you go down that path and say, look, these are homes. Each tree is a home to thousands of beings like us. And when we cut down every tree, this is what we're doing. Related to what's happening in our world, we have Gaza, we have Ukraine, all these places. People are losing their homes, people are dying. And I say we would never want that to happen to those we love or we care about. So why are we letting this happen? Again, that could be a really fun societal community action we can take. When it comes to financial, now, this is a big area.
Some of the problems are so big, maybe people feel quite overwhelmed. I know a lot of our listeners already will be plant-based on this podcast, but then they probably think, what else can I do? What should I, what's the next step? It just seems so overwhelming. Would there be anything you'd specifically, a resource or a recommendation you'd have for them?
Yeah. So one of the big things that we all do is obviously earning money, right? So what do we do with our money? We spend it for our foods or whatever else that we consume, or we invest it, or we save it in banks or pensions. That's the only thing that we do, right? And when it comes to investments and pensions and savings, that's a huge chunk of our money going in. But most of us have no clue about where that money is sitting, what that's investing, what that's doing to our planet. Most of the people that we talk to are well meaning individuals who don't want to kill our home or destroy the planet. But I ask them, do you know where your money is going? So I give them examples of what banks such as Barclays, NatWest, Lloyds, HSBC have been involved in, and I lead them towards Ethical Consumer Magazine, and I tell them, like, check out their website, see what's happening, because if we make sense of this, every single penny that we put in a bank goes somewhere, and unfortunately, most of the things that these banks invest in is destruction. So you have deforestation, you have arms, you have mining, all of these things that we want to avoid in order to have a secure future. We're actually encouraging, we're making our money blood money, right? And that's when the penny drops. They're like, yeah. But then what we do is we look at the highest return on our investment and our savings. So we don't look at where we're doing it. So I ask people to be more conscious of it, because I tell them, you have the power to determine where your money goes. You shouldn't give that power to anyone else. So then I tell them, banks such as Nationwide, such as the Co-op, Triodos, all of these are relatively much better compared to all the big banks that we put our money in. It could be a small savings account, every single penny straight away taken out and invested in the worst kind of industries you could think of, right? So I told them, look, yeah, it is a bank. They will invest in certain things, but it is far less destructive to invest or put your money in certain banks compared to what we normally put it in. So that's a huge action that we can take very easily. It doesn't even you don't even have to protest, go out there, do anything. All you have to do is sit on your computer, switch banks, done, right? And then secondly is the pension stuff. Now we have £3 trillion of UK money locked up in pensions right now, and most of us have no clue where it's gone. The 5 or 6 of the biggest financial corporations in the world invest their money in 3 or 4 things: food, specifically meat, dairy, all of these destructive industries; arms, which is again big business in today's world; and deforestation, mining, etc. These are the big things that these companies invest in, and all of our money is channeled through that via small institutions or big institutions or whatever. And again, I tell people, look, we have to be really careful about this. The whole point of having a pension is to secure your future, right? But if that same money has destroyed your future, what have you done? You've actually destroyed your world in trying to have a pension in. So I tell them, look, if we can be conscious about where we put our money, we can actually start solving a lot of problems that we're facing. So finding ethical pensions, relatively speaking, doing your own investing in terms of, less destructive industries. One thing that's really coming up now is obviously plant-based proteins. What we tend to look for is, companies like La Vie or this, all of these products that are really booming right now all over the world. Find ways to invest in plant-based food companies because they need help, but also this is the future. And people say, oh, but what about the returns on it? I said, you get a whole world to live in. That's your return. We have to think about investment in a completely different way because money is not going to save us. Same thing with giving to charities, giving to sanctuaries. It is all an investment because when we can look after the world, we look after ourselves, right? So that's one of the things. And the other thing that's really coming up is precision fermentation. I don't know if you've heard of this. And I think that could be another very, very industry disruptive initiative that could really help the world. The last one that we've personally invested in is things like seaweed generation. So we can't forget the ocean. The ocean is the one that's really going to save us. So how do we do that? So we could invest in plant-based products that are replacing fish and all these other things, but also reforesting underwater. We see trees on land that we want to reforest and we invest in it and all do that. But what about the trees underwater? What about the forests underwater? How do we get the vegetation and ecosystems alive? So we have to think about, okay, which companies are out there? Well, how can I invest in things like seaweed generation, kelp regeneration? Basically, think outside the box. Because the way we're going right now, 2 years left, and beyond that, we'll be forking out more and more money for increase in taxation, increase in inflation, and all of these things can be linked back to how we're consuming. Because out of all the things that we do as humans, 3 times a day, it's consumption of the food that we eat. And if we can link it back to that, make it as simple as possible, people can relate to that. And especially when it comes to money. So I gave a talk to local councillors a few months ago. As soon as the money thing came up, their ears perked up and they're like, oh, yeah, this is something we need to do. Because just like our health, I always tell them prevention is cheaper and actually possible compared to the cure. There is no cure for runaway climate change. And I tell them, you're worried about money right now. The costs that we'll have to pay for flooding, for increases in insurances, for taxes that we will have to fork out, not the government. When the health crisis, the antibiotic crisis, and the climate crisis comes, they're not going to have to pay. It's our money at the end of the day. So relate it back to what people are interested in. And then hopefully people will see the light in that.
Thank you, Keval. Lots of food for thought there. Would you send us some links maybe we can put on the show notes for people that are interested in reading further on these matters, or, as you mentioned, some ethical investing ideas and things like that?
Yeah, definitely. So I have a website called kevalshah.com, and I've written blogs on ethical investment, ethical banking, very simple stuff, but it gets people going and it gets people into thinking, okay, I need to find something here. So that's one thing. And it also has links to my podcast. It's called the Glass Walls Podcast. And what that does is it exposes injustices in society that are otherwise hidden. So people can again realize, what's happening outside my doorstep in my own community. Things like animal testing, how can I address it? But we have to know the problem first. So it comes in that way. And again, people can relate to this in all sorts of ways. Most of us have pets, cats, dogs, and we love them. We care for them so much. But when people realize that in our own country, we have millions of dogs and cats and monkeys and rats being experimented on, it makes them think, okay, how do I stop this? And that could be the starting point towards the plant-based journey, towards going vegan. So many ways. I believe all of us have a unique gift to give when it comes to protecting our home and saving our planet. We're all unique in so many different ways, and we can all find different ways of contributing. We don't have to be the best public speaker or the best protester or any of that. We can make changes and help others in our own community make changes as well in amazing sorts of ways. I'm really bad at cooking, but there are people out there who have enabled this, have made this happen so that people like myself can get food easily, plant-based foods everywhere, right? People have written recipe books, people like yourselves, plant-based health professionals. I feel it's such an incredible initiative to have. It's probably the first in the world. I know there's probably institutions in the States as well, but this is what people need to know about. And you guys have so much power when it comes to affecting media, when it comes to, calling out wrong information, misinformation being spread in the media and the newspapers and everywhere. So we need more of this, but people need to know more about us.
Absolutely. It's growing. It feels like we're definitely heading in the right direction. But Keval, you said you're not good at cooking, and we were just going to ask you about your dinner
Well,
recipe. We can't let you go without asking you what you're having for dinner.
So I'll rephrase that. I'm okay at cooking. I'm not the best. So I think what we're gonna make today is, I don't know. Have you heard of something called khichdi? Do you know what khichdi is?
No, tell us. Oh, Claire's
No.
nodding.
Yeah, there you go. So you tell me what you think it is.
Well, I know it is an egg dish. So are you going to be doing some kind of tofu scramble?
Wrong. It's not an egg dish. It's actually a Gujarati dish where you have lentils, so you have mung beans, and then you have rice with it, or you could have quinoa. So the healthy version is mung beans and quinoa, and you just have it in ratios of 3 mung beans to 2 quinoa. Bung them in the pressure cooker with lots of vegetables, and just within 5 to 10 minutes, it's done. It's the most delicious thing that you have. It's packed with fiber, protein, phytonutrients, everything. It's all in there. But it's just simple to make, and that's pretty much it. That's what we're going to have.
Oh, I feel like when we were talking about sloppy joes the other day, Daisy, what am I thinking of? Kedgeree.
Oh,
Did you say something different? Yeah, though I've gone off on a tangent there.
but Keval, does it have a sauce, or do you what do you have it with normally? Some salad, or
It could be curry, so potato curry or any sorts of curry you could have, or you could just have it with soy yogurt, and just having that with that, it's just so nice. It's refreshing, especially on hot days like this. If you just have that together, so nice.
sounds lovely. So you are a better cook than you're letting us know.
Yeah, I'm hard on myself on a lot of things, so yeah, but we can all be better, right? So I can't bake anything, so that's another thing I need to work on. What are you guys having for dinner then?
Yeah, well, I was going to ask Claire, what are you having, Claire?
Well, I'm thinking, I've been thinking throughout this entire recording whether I brushed my teeth properly last night, because what I'm having today is the same thing as I had last night, which was a sweet corn chowder. I don't know if you get that magazine, Vegan Food and Living, but it's really good for triggering recipes, even if it's not new to you. And I saw there was a sweet corn chowder in there, and it was really simple, and it was just a recipe that I was able to knock up yesterday, but it served 6 people. So I think I'll be eating it for the next couple of days. But, talking about flossing between the teeth, I haven't done that yet. So I might have a few kernels hanging around that I need to, I'm sorry, that I need to sort out.
That's put me off, sweet corn chowder.
Sorry, Daisy. What are you having?
Hopefully nothing that can get stuck in my teeth. What am I having? I'm having a tagine tonight, actually. I'm having a chickpea and roasted aubergine tagine. It's actually quite simple because I roast the aubergine first in advance. And then when I make the tagine, I add it in. It sort of gives it more depth of flavour. And my one tip, actually, I would say, because I used to eat a lot of couscous, which I think is quite refined, isn't it? Claire knows I'm trying to move away from refined grains into more whole grains. This is my last few months' mission. And so I've found bulgur wheat, which is the whole grain version of couscous. And it tastes fantastic, really fabulous. Have you tried it, Claire or Keval?
I think we had it on holiday, but yeah, I need to get some.
Bulgur wheat. So it takes a bit longer to cook than couscous because it's not refined, but very gorgeous texture, nutty. So I'll be having that alongside my tagine.
And we've both discovered the versatility of the rice cooker and how do you do yours in a rice cooker, Daisy?
I suppose you could do, the packet does say that. I don't know why I've been boiling it, but yeah, you could put it in. I'll try that tonight. That's a good idea. Have you put it in the rice cooker before?
Yeah, I put everything in the rice cooker.
Do you not wish that we had more time?
We'll give you some cooking tips if you.
You know what? It's such a nice experiment to do every time, but I run out of time. I don't have time to cook.
You sound like you're busy doing more important things as well.
Nothing's more important than the food we eat, right?
Well, this is true. Yeah. Equally as important. Oh, well, look, Keval, it's really been fantastic having you on the podcast. I know I say this to every guest, but just listening to you has really galvanized something internally within me, really inspiring. And so obviously we'll put all those links in the show notes. And if people do want to connect with you directly, how would they do that?
I'll give my email address. Yeah, it's keval.a.shah@hotmail.co.uk. But yeah, I'll give that to you as well.
Okay, or they can contact you through Instagram, or are you active
well
on social media?
So I'll give all the links, and then anytime.
Thanks so much for your time once again. Thank you.
Very,
and thank you for
welcome.
all that you do.
Thank you.
Thank you for what you do. And I think, can I just leave everyone with just one thought about this? So the premise or the purpose of what most of us right now, what we do in life is, like I said, is to earn as much money as possible, obviously to secure a future. And we tend to be encouraged to do audits. So, we have financial audits whereby we're meant to sit down weekly and look at our outgoings and ingoings and see what's happening and how we can do better. I want to urge people to do an audit about the planet and how they're impacting the planet. So sitting down every week and just thinking about what foods they ate, how they were active in the community, and how their money is going. And then what can we do to make that better? What kind of plan can we have? So simple things like, how can I invite other people for dinner who might not be vegan, introduce that to them, or like going to events and just handing out information and being more active in the community in that way. So lots of creative ways to do this, but I urge people to sit down every week and just try and have a look what happened and what we can do further. Because I feel that if we don't audit this like we do our finances, it doesn't matter how rich we are in the end. If the planet's dead, then we're all dead. So this is what I want people to just focus on. And this is a reminder to myself as well, because we prioritize everything except for the home or the air or the water that we're literally surviving on. And how can we help others? So Silas Rao, I just wanted to mention, he says this really well. If you don't know, he's the founder of climatehealers.org. He's produced lots of documentaries on Netflix. He used to be one of the founding engineers of the internet. And then as soon as he found out about what's happening to the planet, he made it his life mission to solve the problems and solve the climate crisis. And one of the things that he says is we have to find a way to not only heal each other, but simultaneously heal the planet. So, as healthcare professionals, obviously it's our duty and our job to heal each other. But as a general public, we can heal each other in so many different ways, but also use things like tree planting or looking after each other, feeding the homeless with plant-based foods. All of these things we can do to not only help each other, but help the planet. So that's what I want to leave the viewers with. Think laterally, think of what more we can do, because going plant-based alone is not going to do it. We really have to think about our everyday actions, the stories that we tell to the people that we meet. People ask us, "Oh, how was your weekend? What did you do?" I went to a sanctuary. My wife and I went to Amberwood Sanctuary on Saturday morning, and we helped out. And then things, questions start being asked like, "Oh, why did you go there? What's happening there?" And then seeds get planted slowly. Or I went to a community thing where we're feeding the homeless and we serve them plant-based food. Why? Why was there no meat there? Why was there no dairy there? So just things like that. I just want people to have those conversations, because it always starts with conversations. If we don't have the right conversations and it's superficial every time we have these conversations, we're not getting anywhere.
Absolutely. We love that.
That's what I wanted to leave everyone with.
I'm sure you've inspired a lot of our listeners, and we'll leave them with that. Thank you, Keval.
Thank you. Appreciate it.